I want to thank everyone for being here today. It means a lot to us that you took the time out to attend this poetry reading with the pandemic and with the protests. We hope that poetry will be a respite for all of you for an hour or so. We want to thank all of our sponsors, especially NISCA and Arts Westchester, including all the foundations who support us, the Vidal Foundation, the David G. Taft Foundation, the Rotary Club of the Tarrytowns, the Gannett Foundation, St. Faith's House Foundation, the Alan B. Silfka Foundation, Bandara Foundation, Zand Charitable Trust, the New York Community Trust, Rockefeller Philanthropy, and all of the members, students, and guests. I particularly want to thank the Slapering Hol Press Advisory Committee. Most of you are here today. We couldn't be doing the work that we're doing without all of you. I want to thank all of my students for being here. I want to remind everyone that our most recent publication is Troy Derricott and Dawn Lundy Martin's Conversation chapbook that was beautifully published in and designed by Ed Rayer by Swamp Press, and it came out right before AWP. And please, all of you, save the date, October 30th. Troy Derricott will be reading with Jericho Brown and Catherine Halliburd and Susan Choi and Leslie Jameson at our annual gala, which will be held via Zoom on Friday, October 30th. So please save the date for that. So now I also want to thank everyone who's written to Krista and to me with all the feedback about Hudson Valley Writers Center's creation of the Altman Scholarship for 2 students of color for each one-day workshop. Please see our website for details and to enroll and how to donate for that. Now I want to turn the reading over to Anne Lauinger, who's a scholar and an award-winning poet. Her 2 books of poetry are Persuasions of Fall, University of Utah Press in 2004, and Against Butterflies, Little Red Tree Publishing, 2013. She's a professor emeritus of literature at Sarah Lawrence College, and she lives in Austin. Please help me welcome Anne Lauinger.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks. It's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be the introducer for these 3 poets today, because they are, of course, co-editors of Slapering Hol Press, and I've had the pleasure of working with them and on the advisory committee for many, many years. So let me get started. I'm assuming that we're going to go alphabetically. Is that true, ladies? Good. So Peggy Ellsberg is a professor of English at Barnard College. Her poetry and reviews have been published widely in journals such as the Paris Review, Commonweal, Atlantic Monthly, and Salmagundi. She's the author of 2 books on the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, Created to Praise, The Language of Gerard Manley Hopkins, which came out from Oxford in 1987, and The Gospel in Gerard Manley Hopkins, selections from his poems, letters, journals, and spiritual writings, 2017 Plough. Her poetry chapbook, Riding Out, was published by Kattywompus in 2017. One of the striking things about Peggy's poems is their range, and I'm referring not only to forms, but also to subjects and to sympathies. The poet Richard Wilbur titled a famous poem, "Love Calls Us to the Things of This World." Peggy has heard that call, and she responds with sensuous acuity, with literary learning, and with an open heart. For example, 4 Chinese Screens imagines 4 seasons of a life in 4 stanzas, with all the delicacy, the restrained yet vivid brevity of the brushwork it conjures. But how different then is the rageful energy of With a Line from Homer and its nightmare conclusion. A room in the darkest part of hell, I bought a seat by the fire so red, next to you in the wake yard of the dead. And how different again is the tenderness of both Riding Out and Last Ride, with their elegiac endings. The poet says, "I cannot find in any ancient human tongue the words for his passing from earth." Yet she has found in our shared language words for the human meaning of so much of the world, things we feel, but which without the poet speaking them could not be so deeply known. Please welcome Peggy Ellsberg.
Anne, I've never felt so celebrated. You really, how shall I say, you really get my gig. Thank you so much, Anne. Before I read, I would like to acknowledge the contribution and creative and intellectual guidance of our board, of our advisory board, and I would like to name the members for all of us here. Cindy Bearfui, Sally Bloomis Dunn, Marion Brown, Susanna H. Case, Suzanne Cleary, Julie Danho, Ann Lowinger, Lynn McGee, Mervyn Taylor, Meredith Treed, Esther Weiner, sorry. I see many of you on the postage stamps before me right now, and maybe, who knows, you will actually be on a postage stamp at some point. I would like to read 2 new poems and 2 old poems. And for those of us who spend a lot of time at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, the old poems may be familiar because I've read them before, but I think it's okay to read a poem twice. And also some of you may never have heard them at all. So I'll begin with 2 short new poems. Afternoon on the Firth of Forth. Antler moss, bell cap, candle snuffer, Easter cotton, fish rock, furs, gadwall, gannet, harebell, hen's pace, herring gull, lace cap, lady's smock, monk's hood, oyster catcher, red shanks, rook's rest, salt pan, Scotch broom, shepherd's foot, shepherd's hat, shepherd's purse, yarrow. Poem of Earth in translation. A second new poem was inspired by my extremely distinguished poet colleague, Jennifer Franklin, who presented at a workshop we share, a pantoum. And I thought, pantoum, there's something I haven't thought about since my freshman year in college. But I was so taken by the interesting and quirky challenge of writing a pantoum, where, as you know, rhymes are repeated in a specific order, a specified order. You have to look it up on the internet to find out what that order is. And first and last lines are repeated, or at least the sense thereof. And so I decided to turn my hand to writing some pantoums, and this is one of them. It's called Choir. The drowsing hour shuts its eyes, but slowly, so things fade to dark. Twilight's dove-gray doors swing shut. You light a candle lantern. The drowsing dog sits up from his shallow snooze to bark. Once at the pulse of waxy light. Across the lawn, the house sparrows sleep so hard they might as well be dead till dawn. When the first wash of light overhead wakes the house sparrows again, they who slept like the dead at dawn will begin to call, "I'm up, I'm up." And then from the eave, the branch, the yard, the opening beak of early day alerts whatever's got a beating heart. The revenant hour starts its singing part. And now for the two older poems, they're not very old, they're just older. These two poems reach back to my early life, and they're both autobiography, true, unedited autobiography. The first is called Bob Steele's Farm Report, and twice now, when I've read this poem in a public setting, someone has approached me afterward and said, "I used to listen to Bob Steele's Farm Report." Or I remember putting butter on my toast and listening to Bob Steele's Farm Report. It was early in the morning and it was a farm report. Bob Steele's Farm Report. Each morning, the sound of Bob Steele's smooth baritone woke me from my narrow upstairs bed of tousled sleep. 5 a.m. Down in the kitchen, the farmer and the farm wife waited for the A&P coffee to perk strong in the pot. My mother turned the toast on the grill. My father broke an egg into a cup. The dog curled on the mat by the door, waiting for the day of work. Listening, I suppose, as the big Camelback radio crooned Bob's soothing news. July winter wheat, September hogs, paddock boards for sale, baling wire at auction. The gold-flecked fabric covering the wide speaker glinted in the dog's half-closed eyes. The yellow kitchen light spreading outward toward the farm. And then the second older poem and last poem I'll read, also unedited autobiography. It's called The 5 and 10. And many of us here today are old enough to remember when we had 5s and 10s, 5 and 10s, when we had dime stores. And they were wonderful. They had a little bit of everything. And, it's taken entire gigantic malls to replace the inventory that every 5 and 10 held. This is called The 5 and 10. Also called The 5 and Dime, but we from the farms never called it that. By yellow bus, we went downtown, also called uptown. Not Sundays or Mondays when shops were closed, but every other day, especially Friday to pay the gas or electric or the party line or the rent with the cash someone had counted out for them. Wives passed under the dark red canopy of the 5 and 10. The 5 and 10 had a sloping floor. It had been sealed with creosote. That awful day on Air Force One, her pink suit splashed with blood, they gave Jackie a glass of scotch. She said it tasted like creosote. On the left, a display of evening in Paris in Napoleon blue bottles. It smelled like a prom. Then the circus peanuts, ready to spill out of their glass-fronted bins, and cookies shoveled into waxen bags with a metal scoop, and seersucker housecoats, floral as a meadow, and an aisle called Notions. But nothing smelled as good as the bolts of oilcloth in the back of the store. Each day, my mother served breakfast, dinner, and supper for 7 on a kitchen table covered with oilcloth, which she bought at the 5 and 10. Her dark tailored clothes she bought on layaway. At Christmas, a freakish, forlorn Santa appeared at the 5 and 10. No one liked to sit his bony knee. Once he looked at me and made me cry. Winter afternoons, my father took us in the 2-toned green Packard he saved years to buy to see a cowboy matinee. We could not afford a TV. First, we'd stop at the 5 and 10 for 7 chunks of milk chocolate. The candy clerk used a small hammer to knock off 2-ounce pieces. While my father paid, I would scan Dad's root beer barrels. My father would be dead by fall, heart attack, working in the orchard. I was a brownie scout. Would heaven smell like blue perfume? Would there be cowboys? Full of pity, my scout leader took me after school to the 5 and 10 for soda. December, and night fell fast. The red marquee, brass letters, shone as streetlights sparked on. My leader gave me 50 cents to buy something for my mother. The jewelry aisle, laden with rhinestone brooches and clip-on earrings, was next to the lunch counter, and there I saw her. And a pedestal plate, white cake iced with chocolate, a glass canopy covered it, like Snow White asleep. Absorbed, dressed all wrong in pink with a ruffled apron, my mother leaned over, back bent, face down, wiping the counter, just the way she did at home. She served a grilled cheese sandwich to a stranger, cleared some nickels and dimes, dropped them in her apron pocket. My mother did not see me. In the back of the store, goldfish swam in tanks. Parakeets chirped from perches, and tiny turtles straddled rocks. It was starting to snow. Soon it would be Christmas. Women passed by on the sidewalk, and early streetlights lit them. The yellow bus marked rural route number 1, my bus, pulled up in front. That's all, and oops.
Thank you, Peggy, for that diverse and heartfelt reading. That was beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to go on now and introduce our next reader, Jennifer Franklin. Jennifer is the author of Looming from Elixir Press, 2015, and No Small Gift, Four-Way Books, 2018. Her poetry has been published or is forthcoming in American Poetry Review, Blackbird, Boston Review, New England Review, Poets.org's Poem a Day, and many other places. She teaches poetry in Manhattanville's MFA program and also at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, where she runs the reading series and serves as program director. She lives in New York City. Jennifer's poems steer like a skilled navigator through stormy waters of grief and love. And as with some ancient Mediterranean trading vessel, there are stops to take on motifs from art and from classical myth, but never as inert ballast. Fused with her own emotional life through the alchemy of Jennifer's imagination, the old stories bloom and fruit newly and richly. Jennifer may remind you of Louise Gluck in her nearly hieroglyphic use of the natural world, as well as the plain diction that reveals devastating truth. But she's her own original, a self-fashioned Philomel whose, quote, only instinct is not just to sing, but to be song. In her poem, Fear Told Tranquil, which is a brilliant mind meld with Emily Dickinson, she writes what you will want to exclaim of Jennifer's own poems. Nothing can muffle this sequestered heart. Please welcome Jennifer Franklin.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you for mentioning Louise Gluck because she is my favorite. So that's a big compliment. Wow, I love reading at the Hudson Valley Writers Center because Mervyn Taylor introduced me here last time, and you just introduced me here this time, and what great intros. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to read two poems from Looming, two poems from No Small Gift, and a couple of new poems. The first poem I'm going to read today is from Looming. It's called My Daughter's Body. If you saw her, you would think she was beautiful. Strangers stop me on the street to say it. If they talk to her, they see beauty means nothing. Their sight shifts to pigeons on the sidewalk. Their eye contact becomes as poor as hers. They slip away with varying degrees of grace. As her smile sears me, I hold her hand all the way home from the swings. The florist hands her a dying rose, and she holds it gently, without ripping the petals, like she does to the tulips that stare at us with their insipid faces, pretending they can hold my sorrow in their outstretched cups because I knew them before I knew grief. They do not understand they are ruined for me now. I planted 500 bulbs as she grew inside me, her brain already formed by strands of damaged DNA, or something else the doctors do not understand. After her bath, she curls up on me for lullabies, the only time her small body is still. As I sing, I breathe in her shampooed hair and think of the skeletons in the Musée de Préhistoire in Les Aziz. The bones of the mother and baby rest in a glass case in the same position we lie in now. They were buried in that unusual pose, child curled up in the crook of the mother's arm. The archaeologists are puzzled by the position. It doesn't surprise me at all. It would be so easy to die this way, both of us breathing our last breaths with nursery rhymes on our open lips, the promise of peaceful sleep. The next poem takes its title and first line from Samuel Beckett, a poem of his, and it's also from Looming. It's called I Would Like My Love to Die. I would like my love to die, or at least that I didn't love you so much. If I could turn my heart to winter, I wouldn't need to do this to the earth. If you did not smile in your sleep or plaster your palm to my face with tenderness, I could leave and shut the trapdoor of my hostile-lined heart without looking back. I would like my love to die so I would not have to murder everything around me, so I would not have to be the hunter I have become. But you are not going to release me from your unnatural embrace. You pin me beside you with your thin arm around my neck. It does not look strong enough to hold a small animal, but it is. The next poem is a poem from No Small Gift that came out from Four Way Books in 2018. And it's called One Photograph. It is from a book of the last transport, photographs from the last transport from Auschwitz, edited by Anne Weiss. And it's the last photos that came in from the people who were being killed in the concentration camp, and someone, we don't know who, buried them, risking his or her life to bury them. And they were not published until the 80s, when Anne Weiss spoke to someone at the library there at Auschwitz, and Norton, she gave her permission, and Anne went to Norton to publish them. So this is just about one photograph that was in that book. They hold nothing but each other. Fixed like this forever, mother and daughter, their love survives. Testament to life before God's great silence. No one alive knows or will know their names. Maybe it's wrong for me to mourn them, but I put what remains in a small pewter frame next to my dead grandmother and her sister. When you rest your hands on my shoulders, I think of them, the mother in her housecoat, blossoming roses, the girl in her swimsuit, tummy round and innocent. In the cold cattle car, they had no nest but each other. Human cries around them drowned out owls in autumn, smothered everything but stars that watched them suffer. I hope they were together when they died, that their eyes were the last of what they saw in this fallen world. Even in the thick darkness of my living room, I see them embracing, always almost kissing. And this one is called The Philosopher Did Not Say. It's Margot's favorite poem of mine, so I'm reading it for her today. The philosopher did not say. What secret had Nietzsche discovered when he walked the Turin streets before he flung his arms around a horse being beaten and collapsed into a decade-long coma? Clinging to the cowering brown beast, he said, "Mother, I am stupid. Wild hair and a three-piece tweed suit constrained the body that held the mind that knew too much. Why am I mining dead men for answers when they were all as mad as I am? The horse, his eyes hollow as those of the Burmese elephant that Orwell shot decades later, had the look of every betrayed creature. Perhaps Nietzsche saw the shock in the animal's eyes, how every human contains the capacity to inflict cruelty, the look that turns to recognition, to resignation, to an eye reflecting a field full of fallen horses." The next poems, I have a couple more, and they're all from my new manuscript in progress. And the poems are in 3 parts of the book. Prose poems about contemporary happenings, memento mori sonnets, things that make me think, that remind me that I'm going to die, and poems in the voice of an imagined version of Antigone. So this one is called After Aleppo, and it's actually a new poem, but not in the manuscript, I don't think fits. It's in memory of Dr. Muhammad Wasim Maz, killed in the airstrike on Al-Quds Hospital, April 29th, 2016. It was published in JAMA in October. After Aleppo, let me learn a little of your grace, the ease with which you threw your tired body over the incubators when the airstrikes came. The best pediatrician in the most dangerous city in the world. Let me learn a little of your grace in this city where we are alive and some are still safe. Let me honor you as I bend my tired body to touch my dying child's face. This one is called Wind Phone, and I wrote it after hearing a podcast on NPR about a disconnected phone in a booth in rural Japan where people go to speak to dead loved ones lost in the 2004 tsunami. Wind Phone. You don't yet know that I take care of every weak thing. You wait to tell me your bad news until you're leaving, as if you can bear only so much consolation. If you speak your grief as the gray-haired farmers and fishermen do, on the phone connected to nothing, you may never stop calling the wind. And I'm going to read 2 more poems. They're prose poems, even though Peggy doesn't like prose poems. I'm determined to win her over. They're both called February. This one is for my best friend from graduate school who died after a 9-year struggle with cancer. Her name was Georgia Hatzivasiliou, and she's from Thessaloniki in Greece, and she was a brilliant scientist who dedicated her entire life to studying cancer. February. This has always been the month of death, I tell the dog, as my oldest friend dies on her daughter's birthday. I try not to think of the June evening we ate across from the Acropolis on our last night in Athens. 22 years ago, the only tragedies we knew were those from books we studied in school. We bought the same makeup and sunglasses, so young we didn't know we didn't need them. My daughter wakes at 4 a.m. from a fever and echoes what I whisper to console her. On my birthday, she's too sick to go to school and sleeps all day. When I walk her to the bakery for a croissant, I sing in the dark to keep her calm. Samuel Beckett wrote, "Memories are killing, so you must not think of certain things, of those things that are dear to you, or rather you must think of them, for if you don't, there is a danger of finding them in your mind, little by little." I let myself think of Georgia as I break from work. I sift through the pink photo box from grad school, the first wedding in Castoria, the pension in the mountains where the walls were so thin we could hear each other breathe. For years, I was envious of her healthy daughters. After we were both in remission, she drove me to Sonoma for a mud bath. We stood together in the shower as big as a studio, our scars white and jagged as the path we drove the Peloponnesus to get to the sea. She said we were cured, but I thought we were living on borrowed time. Nobody is ever right about anything. And the last poem I'm going to read is called February. Our long coats are all that separate us from the cold. Halfway around the world, the sky opens to put out wildfires over the carcasses of burned marsupials. We wait for the subway, for the train. My daughter waits for her short yellow bus that arrives each morning with one sobbing boy. He would be a perfect metaphor of Orwell's belief that we're all alone if he didn't look so sad, his shirt buttoned askew. Politicians preen and posture. The air is damp with acquittal. We bend our heads, but not in prayer. Our palms hold small backlit tablets that promise information or escape. Miles north, a student paints a swastika in my old dorm room. Another student covers it with a star. Only the dog is calm, sleeping in a circle in her clean fleece bed. Orwell wrote, "There was truth and there was untruth. And if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you were not mad." I try to put my daughter to sleep on time in her new room. As I read the familiar incantations, flowers climb up the lamp to the ceiling. All the animals have escaped the zoo. I want the story to end there. All of them tucked into the corners of the zookeeper's room, breathing their heavy eucalyptus breath across the night, their fur shining in the moonlight through the blinds. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for unmuting me. Thank you for that beautiful and very moving reading. Thanks. All right, I'm going to go on to our third reader, Margo Taft Stever. Her two full-length poetry collections are Cracked Piano from CavanKerry, 2019, and Frozen Spring, Midwest Press First Series Award from 2002. She has published 4 chapbooks, most recently Ghost Moose and The Lunatic Ball, both from Kattywompus Press. She's co-authored Looking East, little pause there. She's co-authored Looking East, William Howard Taft and the 1905 U.S. diplomatic mission to China. Her poems, essays, and reviews have appeared widely in places such as Verse Daily, Prairie Schooner, Connecticut Review, Poem a Day from Poets.org, Cincinnati Review, Upstreet, Plume, and Salamander. She's the founder of the Hudson Valley Writers Center and a founding and current co-editor of Slapering Hol Press. She lives in Sleepy Hollow, New York. Margaux's poetry is lace and steel. Before you even start pondering this potential paradox, let me resolve it. Margaux's public poems are informed by the same intensity and intimacy that underpin her personal poems, while her imaginative attunement to all kinds of human experiences, indeed to all sorts of living creatures, gives her work a spaciousness beyond the conventionally lyric. Above all is Margaux's ear for language. Her briefest of phrases can make sharply surprising things we thought we knew. For instance, a commuter train. This is a train of thieves, all of us, who never cared for our jobs or our mothers. Or the simple act of going to bed. When I lie down at night above the bitter opening of sleep. My last example, the chamber music that is the extraordinary elegy, My Mother is Dying, where image and sound perform their own rituals of remembrance and hope. This is Apollo's siren lyre, the field-worn answer, the childless response, children waiting for some God to bring them home. Please welcome Margo Stever.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, for that wonderful, incredibly wonderful introduction. And thank you to Slapering Hol Press co-editors, Peggy Ellsberg and Jennifer Franklin, for your fantastic readings. I wanted to thank the other SHP co-editors, Stephanie Strickland, Ann Lowinger, and Suzanne Cleary, who have worked with me during Slapering Hol Press's 30-year history. And the press wouldn't exist without you and without the current co-editors. And I wanted to thank all of you. It's been a remarkable experience to work with all of you. When I first founded Slapering Hol Press 30 years ago, I never envisioned what a bright light, what an important community the press would become for so many poets and for me. And thanks to everyone and to my friends and family for attending this reading. Because the pandemic is part of an environmental catastrophe during which worldwide we have lost 543 species during the last 100 years, according to last week's New York Times article titled "Extinctions are Accelerating, Threatening Even Human Life." The accrual of that loss would normally take place over 10,000 years. Because the pandemic developed as a result of our cruelty to other animals, and specifically our eating wild animals killed in wet markets in Asia, this afternoon, I want to mainly read poems that focus on the environment. As Elisa Gabbard says about poets and climate change in her May 28, 2020 New York Review of Books article, Poems from the Storm, quote, "How can we write about it? Yet, how can we not write about it?" The first two poems I'm going to read are from my first book, Frozen Spring, and the cover, which I don't know if you can see on this, I don't know if you can see it, but it's taken by Lynn Butler, who I believe is in the audience, who's a wonderful photographer, and she's done a lot of work for Slapering Hol Press. She's an amazing photographer. The first poem that I'll read begins with an epigraph by Faith McNulty. Ascension. It takes 7 strong men to drag the 6-foot heart of a blue whale across the deck of a whaling ship. Beads of sweat well up on the sea-stained faces of the 7 men who bear the still warm heart of the blue whale to the boiling vats. The men are deliverers. They tug, rip, tear the heart across the deck to the seething pots. But their hands stick to surfaces like flypaper and recoil, the red matter teething into fingers as if leaching out the blood. Ventricles, gaping mouths stand ajar. Red smoke rises in the darkening mist. Harsh wind raps against crevices, something trying to get back in, tapping out an aberrant beat, an unknown code, and something whines, long and low, a sea moan. Only a crane can lift a 6-foot heart, and as the last inch of the raised organ recedes into the stewing vats, dismembered parts of the heart ascend and billow over the deck. 7 men inhale the vision, their hearts slackening with each breath. And this second poem that I'll read from this collection is titled Conversation with Bertolt Brecht, and it begins with an epigraph by Brecht, but I wanted to mention that it refers to Chilean songs of revolution, and I was thinking of the great Victor Jara, who lived from 1932 to 1973. He was a Chilean teacher, theater director, poet, singer-songwriter, and communist political activist who was tortured and killed during Pinochet's dictatorship. Conversation with Bertolt Brecht. Solely because of the increasing disorder in our cities of class struggle, some of us have now decided to speak no more of cities by the sea, snow on roofs, women. As if the Chilean songs of revolution would bring back the gray fishing boats, sailing through frail, deepening waters at dawn, and the seagulls making earthly sounds. As if these songs could restore the balance, the driven leaf, nail old and rusted, shoved through the bent bough. Each step through mirrors brings us back to the pitch of sleeplessness, the unstrung dream, an oil slick on an ocean still and black. As if all the songs of revolution could bring the murmuring tree back, could restore wind to the rigging, full sail to the morning light. How many years, messages, wars, strange incidences, ironies, the wary eye of the mother wanted to protect her child, promise more, cities near the sea, clear waters, full sail, the morning light. And I'm actually I was planning to read one poem from Cracked Piano, and this is the cover of Cracked Piano that Anne was referring to. And it's one of the poems she talked about. It's the poem titled My Mother is Dying. And I actually wrote this poem in Fred Marchand's workshop, which he gave a couple of years ago. And he's an amazing poet who is in the audience today. And he teaches at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. So I hope everyone gets a chance to take a workshop from him. A lot of the writing, however, was done during the 1980s when my mother actually was dying, but it's an elegy for my mother and for nature. My mother is dying. In the place where she belongs, suffering erases itself. Doves bring her seeds. Horses sleep next to her in the straw. Where she belongs, a welcoming place holds her, keeps her from running away, the greenness of the hay turning to gold. Already the rain's restless trajectory, my mother is busy dying. She no longer knows my name. This is the wind of Eden, the wand of change, the last slave of silence, the knave of rain. So quiet the roving of each vacant quest. Let her be buried in the sea by the seaberry, the briar rock, the fossil chamber. Alone, blown, roadside stray, the flown, restless, wayward ringing, bells clang, ocean downcast rolls. Wandering once again, now I return to the center, searching the level earth, calling her name, remembering that I am lost. The path unfurls before my dog and me walking to the rocks, the ocean on one side, the bay on the other, eiders blessing the waves. The seagull's spontaneous burst, how it hurts with the radio blaring. My mother is dying, gone from a body that has abandoned her. Cry because everything goes haywire, because this is Apollo's siren lyre, the field-worn answer, the childless response, children waiting for some God to bring them home. And then I was going to read a few poems from my latest collection, which is a chapbook by titled Ghost Moose. And a lot of the poems in this collection actually do deal with the sixth extinction. I'm going to read the title poem, which has to do with the 70% die-off of moose in New Hampshire caused by warmer winters and the huge manifestation of ticks that have caused the moose to die. It's titled Ghost Moose. Searching for moose, the children run down to the river, calling the already gone, the forgotten, for freedom of stench, the smell of skunk weeds. Moose calves become ghosts, rubbing fur, skins, scraping ticks off on tree bark. In mild winters, ticks multiply and multiply, occupy moose calves, killing them slowly. Their mothers witness starvation from blood loss. Moose calves resemble ghosts, tearing fur, skin. Calves waste away, wasted bodies frighten the forest floor. Foresters call April the month of death. And I would I wanted to read a poem in honor of the 1,100 mutilated dolphins that washed up on the shore of France. For a while, I didn't understand why they were mutilated, and they were because they were trying to get up to the surface for breath. They require air to live, to survive. Trawlers now work in pairs, and they drag a net between them. And as a result, the European dolphin is on the verge of extinction right now. This is titled Ballad of the Dolphin. Ancient Greeks said they should be treated as humans. Their sailors would not kill dolphins. How I have thought of you caught in the fishermen's nets. They would set them to trap you to catch the tuna that swam under your schools. How the fishermen hung you still alive, upside down. Your cries brought others. Fishermen grabbed you by your tails, strung you and turned you, head down in water, tied you to lifting hooks, and dragged you to the docks. If any of you were still alive when they slung you on cement, they stabbed you. How last survivors churned the water red, leaping in panic, waiting to die. In a good catch, it took them 3 days to kill all of you. How mothers whose calves were entangled could not lift them to the surface. They listened to their underwater clicks and sighs. How often I thought of the whale skippers who would radio the location of hundreds of you, allowing tuna fishermen to track down your entire pod. Think of their nets, deep, foaming, wide, so that hundreds could fit inside. How they used underwater sound to confuse and drive you down. How many of you drowned. Fishermen did not want to compete with you, but killing you was not enough. How they used the screams of several to slaughter more. How one of you hangs from the prow, still alive, calling, calling. And then I'm going to read one more and end with it. Well, it's sort of a new poem. But anyway, this one has to do with the apocalypse. And it's titled End of End of Horses. I write to you from the end of the time zone. You must realize that nothing survived after the horses were slaughtered. We sleep below the hollow, burned out stars. We look into dust bowls, searching for horses. When you walk in the country, you will be shocked to meet substantial masses on the road. We do not know whom to blame or where the horses were driven, who slaughtered them, or for what purpose. Had the horses slept under the linden trees, the generals and engineers pucker and snore on the veranda. And the last poem that I'll read is titled, This Salt Marsh Was Once a Killing Field, Bitterford Pool, Maine. The snowy egret, always on the far edge of the lens. In rows of 2 or 3, we hunch over, lift binoculars in northern mist. Hunters dropped egrets from the sky in a rain of blood, massacred almost an entire species for a wilderness of feathers, quills, quill pens, boas, fancy hats. Sometimes whole egrets adorned ladies' heads. We trudge through sand, eiders dive down, ducklings bob like cork bottles in high surf, dowagers peck at pebbles and insects like sewing machines. Baby egrets abandoned in nests to starve, plumes sold for more than the price of gold. Now herring gulls crowd the rocks. Fashions change, the earth warms. Thank you. That's my first Zoom reading, so.
Great job, Margo. Thank you so much. That was an amazing reading. Thank you, Margo. Amazing reading, Peggy. Thank you, Anne, for introducing us. Anne is on mute. I'm unmuting her.
Oh, how nice. Thank you. Yes, thank you all three for making us feel and think more alively about everything that's going on. Important.
Thank you.
Jennifer, do you three ladies want to take some questions? Are there questions? I don't know how you would like to do this. You can
We'd love to take questions in the chat if and then Anne could read them, or we could look at them and share them. But the one thing that Peggy, Margo, and I wanted to remind everyone of is that there's still a few more days for people to submit to the Slapering Hol Press chapbook competition. And we have our most recent winner here today in the audience, Liz Marlow, if she would like to also wave to everyone, and I'm going to unmute her in case she wants to also tell us a little bit about what that experience was like. We have the artist too who did the cover of our book here, Lynn Butler.
It happens to be Lynn Butler. I was wondering if she could hold up her chapbook, because I don't have it right here in the dining room. But
Liz has it right there at arm's reach. There it is.
Well, is she on mute still? Because I don't see her. I mean,
I am.
Liz,
Can you hear
good.
me okay?
You are.
There
We
you
can
are.
hear you, Liz. Yes.
I had such an amazing experience working with you. I'm beyond grateful. All of the suggestions for edits were all very helpful, because even if it was something where I was like, I don't know if I should change that in that way, it ended up helping me see what questions I needed to resolve in the entire poem itself, and then sometimes answer a question that needed to be answered in a different poem. I don't know if that really makes sense, but I'm just beyond grateful for the experience. So yes, and then the cover is just incredible. I could never have imagined that they would have come up with this cover, because it's a true work of art. It is a poem itself, even though it's a photo, because my chapbook is about the Holocaust, and this photo is of an orphanage overlaid with victims of the Holocaust. And then my first poem of my chapbook is about an orphanage where children ended up being victims of the Holocaust. So everything was so very well thought out in every part of the process. So it was incredible. So thank you. Thank you,
Liz.
Jennifer, Peggy, and Margo, and Lynn.
Thank you for your beautiful poems. I mean, they are so haunting and amazingly powerful. I hope everyone gets a copy. It's a beautiful chapbook.
Thank you.
So, questions? Questions for any of the poets?
Well, maybe everybody wants to go and work in the garden or walk down the
Go
street
read
or
some
something.
poems.
Write some poems.
Once is not
Yeah.
enough. Well, maybe we ought to leave it at that. It was a beautiful, beautiful reading, very moving. And thank you so much to all three of the readers and to all of you who attended in the audience. You made a beautiful Sunday more beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.